The podcast you're about to hear involves true stories, which may contain graphic content that is not suitable for children. Listener's discretion is advised. This is Esoteric Oddities.
So I think I'm getting the meat sweats.
You don't even eat meat.
I know, but we had tofu. I think I have the tofu sweats.
Stop.
Guys, the fucking Eagles won the Super
Eagles
Bowl.
won the Super Bowl, and you guys know that we are based in Philadelphia, so we've had one hell of a 2 weeks. So I know you guys have probably seen all the crazy videos of the night of the Super Bowl on Broad Street. I'm happy that we could be a part of that.
I wasn't even like in Philly. I was in Westchester.
Yeah, didn't you drive down here? Because I saw you.
No, I was in, but I made it on the Philadelphia story. So I posted a Snapchat of all the people in the streets in Westchester, which is miles away from Philly.
Yeah.
It was nuts there. People were like jumping on cars, but some people fucked up.
Yeah, dude. That video of the people falling through the Ritz-Carlton awning.
Yeah, what the Ritz-Carlton, they climbed on top of the awning.
Yes.
The canvas awning that has like a metal frame, and they were standing on the frame. And it fell. It like crumbled.
That was my favorite thing to see.
Oh
and people jumping on the streetlights. I was like, what is going on?
People ripped them out of the...
My phone died. I was so pissed. Like, I literally couldn't even show people what I witnessed that day because my phone died. And I was like, wow. The one time.
You just had to live in the moment.
I did. And I was really mad about it. I'm not going to lie.
But... yeah, it was a little crazy, and then they had the parade. They were expecting like millions of people. I think they were expecting like almost 2 million people.
The parade was so packed. As you guys can see, I'm like super into these Super Bowl events.
Yeah, go sports. Pink and white is somebody's color, right?
Shut the fuck up. That's my color, and I don't care. No shame. Fuck a novelty. That's my team. So the ratio for the bathrooms for the Eagles parade were 3,000 to 1.
What does that mean?
Literally,
for every 3,000 people, there was one toilet.
So me and my friend Kiko, you guys know she was a guest star last episode.
2 episodes ago.
2 episodes ago, my bad. So
it's fine. Just don't let it happen again. We're professionals here.
Shut the fuck up. So me and her, we were like trying to find places to pee. So we settled on this like alleyway, and has a Vespa in it. So I'm like, all right, Kiko, like, go behind the Vespa. And some guy literally rips his head around the corner like, this isn't a fucking toilet. What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm calling the cops.
Call them. I'll be done by the time they get here.
I
the fuck?
literally, well, like, I started drinking at 8 a.m. This was like 9:30. So this was like 10:30. So I was like really fucked up, and I couldn't stop laughing in this guy's face. Like, the funny thing was, it looked like a lot of people had peed there. Like,
oh, probably. Dude, I don't blame people. Like, people are drinking
all day, and then there was a ratio of 3,000 to 1 for a toilet. Like, you got me fucked up.
Yeah, no. Like, what are you gonna do? Hold it? You could, I guess.
Kiko was not holding it. She was like, I gotta go, and we'd like literally go straight. Like, what parade? Because there were so many people, you couldn't even see what was going on.
I know. I got anxiety looking at pictures of it. But, like, honestly, like, my...
it was honestly just, like, a huge tailgate.
My brother went with our friend Dennis, and he had to pee, waited in line for 2 hours, didn't end up peeing, he said. Like, what?
How? What happened? 2 hours?
There were just, like, there was, like, a mob. Nobody was moving. People were butting in, but you couldn't...
He's a boy. He could literally just pop a stand anywhere.
This is true. I would have, honestly, I've almost mastered the art of teaching myself to pee within myself.
Stop.
No, people are doing it now to save time.
No.
You're in traffic. You pee within your body. It goes through second cycle. You get all the nutrients.
Guys, his pupils are so dilated as he's talking about peeing within. I'm nervous for him. I'm going to help him after this, so don't worry. Like, help is on the way.
Oh, Jesus.
So, I have a riddle for you.
Hit me with the riddle, babe.
All right. A crime has been committed at Fremont Street. The main suspect is a man named Sean Baker. It was said that a man had been walking along the pathway when he was suddenly shot in the stomach. The suspect had brown hair, blue eyes, and wore a baggy Armani suit just like Sean Baker. Sean Baker was asked to tell the story right from the beginning. Well, said Sean, I was just hanging around the park when I saw this man walking along the pathway. Suddenly, a guy came up from behind him and shot him. I ran home as fast as I could. The police asked him to give a description of the murderer. He had a red mustache, red hair, and a baggy Armani suit. I think this man is telling a lie, said one of the policemen. How did he know?
How did the cop know that he's telling a lie?
Uh-huh.
Because he didn't have red hair.
How can the murderer shoot him in the stomach if he came up behind him?
Oh. I didn't even think about that. You got me.
I sure did.
Was that like a fake riddle that somebody just like...
Put together? Yes, because it really...
That was so detailed. The dude had a name. He was wearing Armani.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Do you want another one?
Okay.
Okay. A dead body is found at the bottom of a multi-story building.
Perfect.
Seeing the position of the body, it is evident that the person jumped from one of the floors committing suicide. A homicide detective is called to look after the case. He goes to the first floor and walks in the room facing the direction in which the body was found. He opens the door in that direction and flips the coin towards the floor. He then goes to the second floor and repeats the process. He keeps doing this until he reaches the last floor. Then when he climbs down, he tells the team that it is a murder, not suicide. How did he know that it was a murder?
Because it was tails when he got to the 5th floor.
None of the windows were left open. If the person jumped, who closed the window?
Okay.
It never even said anything about open windows.
Right, that's okay. Wait. That was because you said that the person jumped and was found at the bottom. Didn't you say the bottom of a building? Mm-hmm. In my head, I thought they jumped from like from inside the building, like a stairwell.
It also never said that like anything.
That's
about closed,
canceled.
open windows.
Fuck that. Future John, who's editing this, edit that shit out. That was bullshit. I want my money back. Speaking of wanting your money back, I felt so bad. A couple nights ago, I went out to dinner with my boyfriend, his sister, and her boyfriend, and we went to this.
Thanks for the invite, you crumb.
Okay. I honestly don't know how to take that, but so we go to this this Malaysian food place. We had been there before. It's Satay Campur, and I've been there 3 times before. Have you been there?
Where is it?
It's in South Philly.
No.
So we go there. It's our 3rd time there, and every time I've been there, it was pretty good. So I order this fish, right? Because I'm a vegetarian, I'm a pescatarian, so I eat fish, or used to. So I ordered this fish. This is last Saturday, I think. The guy brings it out. You already know.
The head was attached.
It was a whole fucking fish.
Why? Who wants that?
It was a whole fucking fish. And this had happened to me before, like on my birthday at Marimoto's 2 years ago. And I literally, like, I couldn't eat it. Like, I felt bad. The waiter had to come, like, take the head, and I just couldn't do it. I just drank my wine. And I felt bad because, like, that shit's expensive. So the dude brings me the fish. It's looking at me. I can see its fucking eyes. I know what its dad looks like. I can see its personality. And I go to, like, cut into the fish. First off, they didn't debone it. And I have a fear of fish bones because I choked on one once. And for some reason...
Why wouldn't you debone that? Like, if you're gonna...
They literally... No, it was straight up the whole fish.
How do you cook
all
that?
The innards and shit. Throw it on the grill. They put it on a banana leaf. They season it. Put it on a banana leaf. Throw it on the grill. They gave it to me with the fins. The fucking... All this shit. Like, hey, if you're Malaysian out there and you...
what are you supposed to do with that?
You like fillet it and cut it open yourself and just like eat it. But I couldn't fucking do it. I felt so bad. I just looked at it and Jason looked at me and he already knew. He's like, do you want me to? I was like, no, it's fine. So luckily his sister wanted it. So I gave it to her, but I just...
What did you eat?
Water.
You didn't eat?
I had Pinot Grigio. It's fine. It was really good. It was a great atmosphere and our waiter was cool. But since that day, I've literally gone vegan, straight up vegan. I mean, I don't think I'm going vegan. I just like, I don't know. I haven't really been in the mood. It kind of like scarred me for a hot second there.
I can't eat fish no more.
But I do like sushi, so maybe I'll go back. But I haven't had any dairy. Like the next day we went out shopping and I got all vegan. I just made Sarah vegan breakfast because it's Saturday in the morning. And yeah.
I love it.
It's been good. I feel good. I feel like even my farts are fresher.
Fresh farts.
Because they're organic and non-GMO and vegan. Jesus Christ. You guys, if you're still listening, we're about to dive into this. But before I do, I want to shout out another podcast, the Stranger Than podcast. I've been listening to them for a little while, and they're like super supportive. So thank you guys.
Great people, great podcast. If you're looking for something new.
It's Joanna and Nate, and they do true crime, unsolved mysteries, weird occurrences, misunderstood phenomena, and weird happenings. Basically like similar topics to what we do here, except they do like a bunch of crazy shit that I'm super into. And I definitely love how much research they do. And You know DB Cooper? Do you know who that is?
Yes.
The guy who like discreetly held up a plane in the early 70s, demanded money in a parachute.
Love
then
him.
he jumped out. You know who that is? And he got away with it. And he never got caught. Well, their junior high teacher from when they were in junior high was like one of the guys who gave him a parachute. Yeah, they have it.
No,
I won't
that's
give any details. You'll have to
crazy.
go listen to it. But yeah, that's Stranger Than Podcast. So go check them out.
And Than is THAN, not THEN.
Stranger Than. Yeah, but they're awesome. If you guys are listening, I think you guys will really like them. And while you're doing things with your thumbs on your devices, head on over to patreon.com/esoteric oddities. Join the $5 tier and you can get bonus episodes a month, baby, if you like listening to our sweet, sexy, sultry voices when we talk about decomposing bodies and terrible things that happen to people. You can go ahead and sign up there and hear more.
Thanks to y'all. I hate my voice less. Thank you.
That sounded like a presidential campaign. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is wrong with us? We haven't even had a long day.
We normally do, and we keep it together, and now it's literally so early, and we
I think
can't
it's
keep it together.
I think it's because this is only our second episode that we've ever recorded in the morning.
Yeah, and it seems to be
And it's a weekend. It's the frickin' weekend. Not when you're listening to this. When we put this out, it's
the
a Monday.
freaking weekend, not just that. Yeah. Copyright infringement.
All right. I think Sarah's going to go ahead and go first. We do have a topic. There is a running theme, but it's up to you guys to figure it out.
Dun-dun-dun.
You be the detectives.
Okay, so the state of Texas has executed 548 people since 1982. 279 have been executed during 2001 to 2014. Executions rose in Texas in 2000 when 40 people were put to death. In 2018, the state of Texas has put 3 people to death. That's crazy. It's only
Yeah.
a month that happened.
Yep.
Columbia University law professor James Liebman, who had an interest in America's use of capital punishment, and 12 of his students took a special interest in the conviction of Carlos de Luna. This particular case is based on a 6-year intensive detective work. So, basically, these were law students of Columbia University, and the professor basically looked into this case, and he thought that everything he found was really weird. So, him and his students basically
Ooh, cracking open the case.
Yes, it's so crazy because it's these people are not detectives; they're
about to be
law students. So I'm really excited for this. Starting in 2014, the group interviewed over 100 witnesses. Acquiring about 900 pieces of material, the group went over multiple crime scene photos and legal documents that stacked over 10 feet high.
Are you going to tell me what he did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I mean, that was a stupid question. I just want to fucking know.
They chased down every possible lead in this case. The discovery shocked the students. It was a house of cards. We found that everything that could go wrong did go wrong, says Professor Liebman. Carlos de Luna, age 20, was arrested on February 4th for the brutal murder of Wanda Lopez. Wanda was stabbed once through the chest with an 8-inch lock-blade buck knife, which had cut an artery, causing her to bleed to death. From the moment of Carlos's arrest until the day of his death by lethal injection 6 years later, de Luna consistently pleaded not guilty. He even named the culprit, a notoriously violent criminal called Carlos Hernandez. Now, they're both named Carlos, so just...
Okay, keep that in mind.
At his 1983 trial, Carlos de Luna told the jury that on the day of the murder, he'd ran into Hernandez. He said he'd known Hernandez for 5 years. The 2 men, who both lived in the southern Texas town of Corpus Christi, stopped off at a bar. Hernandez went over to the gas station, which was called the Sigmar Shamrock, to buy something. When he didn't return, de Luna went over to see what was going on. De Luna stated he saw Hernandez inside the Shamrock going back and forth with a woman behind the counter. With de Luna's record of numerous arrests for burglary and public drunkenness, plus a conviction for attempted rape and auto theft, he fled the scene. I just kept running because I was scared, says de Luna. When he heard the sirens of police cars screeching towards the gas station, he panicked and hid under his pickup truck. 40 minutes later, after the killing, he was arrested. DeLuna was found with $140 cash in his pocket, making him look guilty. There was no record of $150 cash missing from the gas station's cash register. I'm like
I feel like I should probably get a notebook and take notes.
And be like, oh my god. Cops brought DeLuna back to the Shamrock. A customer filling his tank before the murder told police that DeLuna was the man he saw putting a knife in his pocket outside the store. Another customer who rushed to the store's entrance when he heard Lopez struggling identified DeLuna as the man who emerged. A couple saw a man running a few blocks away and later identified DeLuna in police photos shown.
My assumption is Wanda was in the gas station and was murdered there.
Yes.
Should I not have said that yet? Are you getting there?
No, I thought that was like...
Implied?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not?
No, I think it was implied.
It's so hard when
I just want it all in black and white, babe.
It's so hard when you're writing this down because it's like you're not making a mental picture for everyone else, or like, you know.
Yeah.
At the trial, DeLuna's defense team told the jury that Carlos Hernandez, not DeLuna, was the murderer. They told the jury that police had looked for a Carlos Hernandez after his name had been passed to them by DeLuna's lawyers, without success. They had concluded that Hernandez was a fabrication, a phantom who simply did not exist.
What?
Yeah. So
like probably...
They literally... So DeLuna's lawyers gave the prosecutors Hernandez's name, and it somehow didn't come up at all.
But he was like friends with the dude.
Yeah.
So he wasn't brought to court?
No.
He wasn't brought to trial?
Because they didn't believe him. As soon as Carlos got arrested, they all assumed it was him.
Because of the two eyewitnesses thus far?
Yeah. Just wait. The story like really unfolds. The chief prosecutor said in summing up that Hernandez was a figment of DeLuna's imagination. A guilty verdict was reached with little delay. The capital murder trial lasted 6 days in July 1983. So they put him on death row.
In 1983? Mm-hmm.
So I want to stop for a quick second and discuss something. So the issue with all of this is Hernandez was supposedly a known convict, but why didn't his name run through anything?
Yeah, what the fuck? Okay.
Sketchy. Professor Liebman took interest in this case. 4 years after DeLuna was executed as part of a project in the issues with the death penalty sentence, Liebman asked a private investigator to take 1 day to consider the case. Liebman was more interested in the background of Hernandez than DeLuna. By the end of just one single day, the private investigator had uncovered evidence that Texan police, prosecutors, defense lawyers, and even judges missed that Carlos Hernandez did in fact exist.
Weird that this man, who has a criminal past, exists.
Liebman's investigator tracked down a woman, which remained unnamed, who supplied Hernandez's date of birth, which unlocked Hernandez's criminal past as the case rapidly unraveled. From this information, Liebman and his students were able to curate a profile for Hernandez. He was an alcoholic with a history of violence, who was also in the company of his trusted companion, a lockblade buck knife.
Oh my god, wait, can I stop you for 1 second? The students, this is all happening after the fact.
After the fact.
So this isn't, they're researching this in 2004, correct?
2014.
Oh shit, 2014. Okay, and all of this happened in the 80s.
Yes.
Okay, so by the time they had gotten to it, it was a 20-year-old case. Is that 20 years? Holy shit, that's 30 years. It was like a 30-some-year-old case. I did math one time in life.
Yay.
Okay, all right, so this is all done. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Over the years, he was arrested. This is Hernandez.
Right.
39 times, 13 of them carrying a knife, and spent his entire adult life on parole.
How the fuck?
I'm saying.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to get loud.
But was almost never put in prison for his crimes. A difference that Liebman thought was because he was used as a police informant. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a person or persons who provides information to various organizations. So basically he's a rat.
And not like that cute rat that was shampooing itself.
That wasn't a rat, remember?
I know. I just wanted you to get pissed.
It is hard to understand what happens without that piece of a puzzle, Liebman says. The crimes that Hernandez has committed consist of several holdups of Corpus Christi gas stations. Just a few days before the Shamrock murder, he was found outside a nearby 7-Eleven carrying a knife, a detail that was never disclosed to DeLuna's defense.
If only that information would have been provided. Maybe if he was a real person.
Hernandez also had a history of violence towards women. In 1979, he was arrested twice for the suspicion of murder. The victim was named Dalia Sacetta, who was stabbed and then had an X carved into her back. The first arrest was made 4 years before DeLuna's trial, and the second while DeLuna was on death row. Yet the connection between this and Hernandez being the phantom presented to DeLuna's jury was never made. In October 1989, just 2 months before DeLuna was executed, Hernandez was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for attempting to kill with a knife. Another woman, called Dina Ibanez, even then, no one thought to alert the courts or Texas state as it prepared to put DeLuna to death. Allegedly, Hernandez would call himself a knife killer. He told numerous people...
To think that could have been stopped. Amazing.
Who would have thought?
That's okay. Continue.
He told numerous people that he was the one who killed Wanda Lopez. He joked that DeLuna had taken the fall for him.
This man is not nice.
No. You're not nice. You're rude. Sorry. His admissions were so widely broadcasted that even Corpus Christi police detectives came to hear about them within weeks of the incident at Shamrock gas station. Literally within weeks, which means that DeLuna was on death row for 6 years and they didn't do anything.
Okay.
This was the same Carlos Hernandez who prosecutors told the jury did not exist. Going back to the story above, prosecutors said that Carlos Hernandez did not exist and was a figure of Carlos's DeLuna imagination.
Yeah, because he wasn't real. He didn't do those crimes.
Okay, they were also friends, or whatever, for 5 years, so I would really feel like I'm going crazy. Other flaws in DeLuna's case were: he was put on death row largely on the eyewitness's testimony of one man, Kevin Baker, who had seen the fight inside the Shamrock and watched the attacker flee the scene. When Baker was interviewed years later, he said that he hadn't been that sure about the identification as he had trouble telling one Hispanic person apart from the other. As if that's...
You know, they got different fingerprints and shit. Different DNA and shit.
Also, they all don't look alike.
Oh my God. Y'all, but they look the same. I couldn't tell them apart. They had the same first name, I'm sorry.
Like, what? As if the information above wasn't enough to prove the innocence of Carlos DeLuna, there was little crime scene investigation. No blood samples were collected, no regular forensic procedures were completed.
Also, okay, wait. In this defense, back in the early 80s,
they didn't do that.
They didn't really do forensic shit.
None of the items were found on the floor of the Shamrock. A cigarette stub, chewing gum, a button, comb, and beer cans were forensically examined for salvia or blood.
Salvia? Saliva?
Salvia. Salvia. Salvia.
Don't do drugs, kids.
No,
It was tested. It was drug-free, but just a figment of your imagination.
Why can't I read? Let's talk about that.
It's okay.
There was no scraping of the victim's fingernails for tracings of the attacker's skin. When Liebman and his students looked at the enhanced crime scene photos, they found a footprint from a man's shoe imprinted in a pool of Lopez's blood on the floor.
From a fucking goddamn picture.
Yet
Are you kidding me?
no effort was made to measure the boot.
Fuck it all. In the butt. That's okay.
There it was, says Liebman. The murderer had left his calling card at the scene, but it was never used. Even the murder weapon, the knife, was not properly examined, though it was covered in blood.
Why look at it? She's dead. Can't bring her back. We're dealing with a figment of someone's imagination and possibly two guys who look alike.
In other photos, Lopez's blood was spattered about 3 feet high on the walls of the gas station counter. Both DeLuna's clothes and shoes were tested for any trace of blood. You guessed it.
No blood.
No traces of blood were found. The prosecutors said it must have been washed away by the rain.
By the rain!
It's funny because I have "by the rain" in caps. Like, what? Less than 2 hours after the murder happened, the police chief in charge of the homicide investigation ordered all detectives to quit the Shamrock and allowed its owners to wash it down, sweeping away any evidence that could have saved a man's life. When Liebman asked to see all the stored evidence in the case so that he could subject it to the DNA testing, it was not available to investigators in 1983. He said that he was told that it all disappeared.
It just disappeared. It was a figment of your fucking imagination.
This wasn't the trial of O.J. Simpson. It was an obscure case, the kind that could involve anybody. Maybe those are the cases where miscarriages of justice happen. The routine, everyday cases where nobody thinks enough about the victim, let alone the defendant. That was a direct quote from the professor.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
Thanks. Carlos Hernandez died of natural causes in a Texan prison in May 1999, having been jailed for assaulting a neighbor with a 9-inch knife. Carlos de Luna commented on his own ending in a television interview a couple of years before his prosecution. Maybe one day the truth will come out, he said from behind reforced glass. I'm hoping it will. If I end up getting executed for this, I don't think it's right. So I couldn't really put this in, but Carlos and Carlos looked identical. They were the same height, the same weight. Like, if you look at the
photos of them next to each other,
they look alike. But regardless of them looking alike, that Kevin Baker, like, it's not
Kevin
because
Bacon.
They were Spanish that you couldn't identify them. Like, come on.
That's botched. Okay.
I'm saying.
So, I feel like this could definitely be a separate, like, I should start taking notes on things that we should just do entire podcasts on.
Yeah, literally though.
Because then it becomes like the death sentence, the argument over the death sentence. And I used to work at Lush, and they have this bath bomb. I think it was called 31 States bath bomb. And we sold it while I worked there. And basically, it represents the 31 states that still allow the, people to be sentenced to death. Yeah. And it's super controversial, and there's arguments, obviously, on both sides.
Always. Isn't there always?
And so the company that started this, Lush works with a bunch of companies. So this bath bomb was sold across North America. However, the founder of this company happened to live in Philadelphia. So that guy who founded this this program, basically, it's a, I'm totally going to get this fucked up because I didn't do research, but I'm just like remembering off the top of my head. They were basically like activists, I guess. Yeah. The whole group is made up of activists who are exonerees. So they were on death row and then they were proved innocent. See? So all these people, except for the founder, he was not, but he had like close ties with the story. I don't remember exactly why. I met him. I met his wife. Super nice people.
Oh, that's great.
So basically, this whole bath bomb is sold, raising awareness for the 31 states. Also, if you're going to fuck up, Texas really is the state
Texas
to not fuck up in.
Right, I'm saying.
But he didn't even fuck up. He, like, his friend did. Okay, yeah, so it's made up of exonerees who were proved to be innocent while on death row. Situations like this have happened in the past and probably will continue to happen. And It's fucked. It's one of the most terrifying things you can think of. You're put in jail for a crime you did not commit.
And you're telling people, like, I'm guilty. Also,
no, you're telling people you're innocent.
I mean, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
You're telling people you're innocent.
Please don't be a lawyer, because fuck. You be up there throwing the, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. He's not guilty. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think my mind is too scrambled from the salvia to...
salvia? Yo, the tofu scramble. Got your brain.
Yeah, it's scrambled. But with this case in particular, like, there were so many points, and it was too late. Honestly,
it's always too late when it happens.
That's the issue, that it was too late.
Yeah. Okay. And I do see the argument on the side for the death penalty, because it's like, for the people who did fuck up, or people who are true monsters that we don't want on this planet anymore. Die. Well, not we, because, some people, then there's like the whole spiritual, like humans, are we really supposed to kill each other? But like, if they took somebody's life, but then the people who are exonerees, who got off, who could have possibly, like, who were so close.
I wish Carlos de Luna was an exoneree.
Yeah. So that day working in Lush was kind of awkward, because we mentioned it to customers. And I think that was like and I don't even know how to even talk about this. This is how, like, weird this situation was. But for me to be put in a situation where I have to not push a product on people, but like mention it. I had customers who were getting pissed at me, like it was my choice to sell it.
I just work here.
Like, I see the argument either way, and I'm just like, 31 state, like
I'm just telling you the facts,
it was really awkward because I saw it from both sides. You know, taxpayers don't want to pay money for fucking garbage ass people to continue living their lives. If they took the life of somebody, why should they continue their lives? But then situations where, you know, people are proved innocent when it boils down to the system is fucked. There's choppy police work. There's choppy investigators. There's bias.
I think that Hernandez got off solely on the fact that he was a rat. That he was feeding information to police, and that's what kept him.
Damn, I feel so bad for that guy.
Same, and like he knew all along. Like he was just like, guys, I didn't do it.
Yeah, and like, fuck, man, like listening to you tell the story and like doing research on it kind of dehumanizes it because it's a story. It happened in the 80s. It was years ago, but that was somebody's reality. That was like, picture you sitting in, however they killed him by lethal injection. Was it lethal injection?
Lethal injection, yeah.
You are sitting there in like the last seconds of your life watching all these people who have control over like a situation that you did not do because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, hanging out with the wrong person, and there was choppy police work, and fuck. You just gave me a stress pimple. That one was already here, but you're giving me another one.
I mean, like, okay, so I feel like people are going to argue the fact that, like, even regardless of him not committing the crime, he still committed crimes, but, like, no.
No, because
not as much as Hernandez.
He committed the crimes and he did the time.
Right. Hernandez was out here just stabbing people, stabbing women. Like,
I'm not saying DeLuna was a great person. I'm not saying,
he
yes,
didn't
he had
deserve to die. He could have served his time and then just like been let out in 30 years. But like this specifically, he didn't commit that.
Jesus Corpus Christi. That was good. Thank you for sharing that story. In 2014, they started putting the pieces together. So the case was just dropped and nobody showed interest in it after that. Mm-hmm. And then it took till 2014. Think about how many cases are out there right now.
I'm saying because what happened was they like just didn't give a fuck. So after...
Right, what's done is done. Dust your hands off. I mean, they also didn't have forensic shit back then. Like we have come a long way on the investigating side of things. But humans are still humans. There's still human error. There's still shady people.
The fact that they wanted to clean the whole... gas station crime scene without like just like they were there for...
How are they gonna sell slushies if there's blood on the floor? Oh my god, you're just thinking about yourself.
Oh my god, I'm so selfish.
Jesus.
All right, so
am I up to bat?
what do you got for me?
All right, you keep looking at my forehead. Do I have something here?
No, I always do that. I like look away. I can't look in people's eyes.
I hate when people don't look at me in the eye.
Because that's what happens.
Oh my god, the way to make a person feel really awkward or like really uncomfortable is when they're talking, just look at a spot on their face and don't break eye contact with it. You're doing it right now.
I know.
Stop.
I don't know how to look at people's eyes.
We were staring in each other's eyes. I think I just fell in love. Okay, so this is my story. Thank you guys for coming. Shout out to Katie Medler, who is a reporter from the Washington Post, and she wrote a pretty lengthy story covering this case. Link in the show notes. In the summer of 2000, life was good for the Cam family in Georgetown, Indiana. Kim, the mother, was a financial analyst. Her husband, David, had recently resigned from the Indiana State Police to take a job with the family business, and that summer he helped coach for their 7-year-old son, Brad, and their 5-year-old daughter, Jill's Little League teams. So the kids spent their days at Graceland Christian School, where Brad was in 2nd grade and Jill was in kindergarten. Twice a week, they spent their afternoons with Kim's parents. Their last name was Wren. I'll be talking about them, Frank and Janice. So every Sunday, the family worshiped at the Georgetown Community Church, a structure and congregation built by David's grandfather and led by his uncle, and Kim was the treasurer there. On the evening of September 28, 2000, at 7:30 p.m., David Cam was playing basketball in the Georgetown Community Church with 11 other players, while Kim picked up Jill from dance class and Brad from swim class a few miles away. When his basketball game ended, David got into his car and drove the 5-minute distance from the church to his house on Lockhart Road. As he pulled up to the driveway, he noticed the garage doors were open, something his wife Kim would never do at night. As he pulls up closer, his headlights reveal a horrific scene. His wife, Kim, was laying on the garage floor next to her parked black Ford Bronco, the passenger door wide open. Her pants were removed. She was covered in blood. When he screamed her name, she didn't move. He panicked and looked for the kids. He stuck his head into the open door of the car and found a parent's worst nightmare.
Oh.
5-year-old Jill was slumped over in the back seat, her face covered by a curtain of blonde hair wet with blood. Beside her, 7-year-old Brad was shot in the chest, draped over the back seat, looking like he was trying to get away. Frozen in their last moments of terror, all 3 bodies were shot with just 1 bullet, execution style. At 9:29 p.m., the state police post received the call from their former colleague. Keep in mind, he used to work there. So he says, "Patrice, it's Dave Cam. Let me talk to Post Command right now." When she connected him to the Post Command, David was freaking out. He says, "Get everybody out here to my house now. My wife and kids are dead." When officers arrived, they found David beyond distraught at the threshold of the gruesome scene. Kim and Brad were sprawled out on the garage floor, bleeding profusely as Jill lay in the SUV alone. David told police that when he found them, the sun was still warm, so he climbed over the passenger seat, reached across the center console, pulled Brad out, placed Brad on the ground, and attempted several minutes of CPR. When he couldn't save his son, David ran inside and called his old Indiana State Police post. So the police went to tell the tragic news to David's parents, Donald and Sue Cam, but David had already called them. David's siblings found Sue on the ground rocking back and forth, clutching pictures of Brad and Jill to her chest, crying, "My babies," over and over. I'm like gonna cry.
I am gonna cry.
Upon investigation, they found 8 specks of Jill's blood on David's shirt. An investigator stated that the pattern was consistent with blowback from a close-range gunshot. Medical examiner Dr. Tracy Corey stated that Kim had died with 18 deep cuts and bruises, showing signs she had fought back with her killer. And 5-year-old Jill had, quote, blunt force trauma to the genitals, consistent with molestation or straddle fall that likely occurred within 24 hours of her murder. Then, suspicions regarding David's behavior that night raised questions. Once the story got out, people were like, well, why did he call the state police post and he didn't call the emergency 911? Other questions.
Because they were already dead.
Yeah, but that is an interesting thought.
I mean, I wouldn't call the ambulance either. It's like,
I would call 911. First off, it's less numbers. Second off,
I guess it does make him look weird when he's like,
yeah,
I'm gonna
he also
call my work.
Yeah, I will get into that a little bit later. And people wanted to know why he gave Brad CPR, but he didn't attempt to revive his wife or daughter. I mean, to that personally, I think, if his body was warm and the other ones were shot in the head, and he was looking to save one, like he didn't have a cell phone. If you think about it, he was really trying. He was like, if there's any chance of anything happening, I need to do CPR rather than run in the house to my corded phone, call, get connected to somebody. If he was still warm. Okay,
I'm going to try to save him.
But people in the town were wondering why he gave Brad CPR and not his wife or daughter. Also, that is the reason why Brad was found on the garage floor when the police got there. So the Sunday after the murders, David Cam sat in the pews with his family and friends for his service. This was not the funeral service, though, since the bodies of the 3 were still under investigation. For 4 hours, David's uncle preached and gave his condolences. When the service ended, everybody stepped outside and news vans were swarming the scene, confronting the family. David was willing to speak to an interview, and his nonchalant responses got people in the town infuriated. Now, I tried my best to look up this original interview, because they did talk about it. Like, they referred to this interview being a point why people were frustrated, but I looked, I couldn't find it. David Cam's older brother, Donnie, recalls how the community convicted him almost immediately after that interview. He says, quote, "Well, he wasn't crying. The people in our town would say he did it because he wasn't crying, but he had nothing left. He was empty. We all were." And, to this, you can't judge another person's way of coping with something just because it's out of the usual, just because it's not what you think you would do in that situation, because until you're in that situation, you don't know what you would fucking do.
Right.
That afternoon, David was called by police for his second round of questioning. He sat down with the 2 cops that he knew well. They had shared a break room and coffee together.
So let me guess, people probably were like, oh, he knows these people, so he's guilty and they're trying to cover it up.
Au contraire.
Oh, God.
By this time, the murder of Kim, Brad, and Jill Cam had become a high-profile case and was widely publicized. And in this interview, the tone changed because now the investigators had a working theory of the murders, and the evidence they were gathering pointed to their one-time fellow trooper, David Cam as the killer himself. So they had a timeline, and they believed that the murders took place between 9:15 and 9:30 that night, after David had returned home from the basketball game. So police interviewed a neighbor who said that he heard gunshots around 9:20 p.m. on September 28th, after David Cam had already arrived home. And in the video where they were interviewing him, back at the second interview, David says, quote, it's wrong. I'm telling you, people are confused. But the police, the investigators, and the community had David Cam as their lone suspect.
So again, they're literally basing this off of a witness that doesn't really know what's going on. Okay.
And I'll let you guys know that that was only one person, one neighbor, who said 9:20 p.m. was the time, and they're taking it and running. So he became their prime murderer. He came home from his basketball game using as an alibi, and he killed his entire family. That's what they're looking at. So investigators told David about physical evidence that they had. The specks of Jill's blood, barely visible to the naked eye, were on the bottom of the t-shirt that he wore, those 8 specks of blood. They already determined that the blood spatter pattern occurred only from a close-range gunshot wound. The crime scene already told investigators that David Cam was their man. And then there were signs of a cleanup. When asked about traces of bleach found on the scene, David replied, quote, I didn't clean up shit. Somebody may have, but it wasn't me. That person is your suspect. On October 1st, 2000, hours after his second interview, just 3 days after the shooting, the Indiana State Police arrested David Cam and charged him with the murders of his wife and his 2 children. David Cam continued to claim his innocence. So the funeral was a few days later, but the police did not let him attend. Instead, at midnight, 15 officers escorted him to the church, handcuffed and shackled, to see the lifeless bodies of his family. They gave him 5 minutes to say goodbye.
I want to cry.
And so the threats began. A pre-recorded message was left on the answering machine that belonged to David's brother, Donnie. If your brother gets out of jail, I've got a bullet for you, a bullet for his uncle, a bullet for your attorney, and a bullet for him. Just something nice to come home to. So the doors of the Georgetown Community Church closed. Many people in the congregation did not want to attend that church because it associated with the Cams. Remember, David's grandfather built it, and it was run by his uncle. Aunts, uncles, and cousins in the family began using fake names at restaurants to avoid the hostess calling out Cam Party of 4. The entire community ostracized the Cams and openly supported Kim's family. So Kim's family's response, the Wrens, her parents were under the same impression that he was the one who did it.
Right.
So Kara Cam, her sister Lauren Cam, were Donnie's daughters. So they would be David's nieces, and they shared a last name. And they were both within months of Brad and Jill's age. I think Kara was Brad's age, the older one, around 7, and then Lauren was in like kindergarten at the time that this had happened. After David was convicted, some of their friends weren't allowed to sleep over anymore. At night, Lauren slept with a hammer to make her feel safe. A few substitute teachers even called them out in front of other students. Quote, are you related to that guy that killed his family? In all capital letters, I say fucked. F-U-C-K-T.
I love that. Like,
a substitute teacher reading off attendance sees the last name Cam.
like you don't even go here.
Bye. You're not even a real fucking teacher. That was so rude of me. I'm sorry. If there's substitute teachers listening, I'm just lashing out at that one person. Substitute teachers are real teachers, and I appreciate your work, but not this person. Though only one neighbor heard the gunshots at 9:20, there weren't enough witnesses nor evidence to place the deaths at that time.
That's literally a red flag right there. You're telling me that only one person could identify what time the gunshot was shot?
Mm-hmm.
How?
Supposedly the only person who heard gunshots in a neighborhood. Now their yards were big, but a gunshot is a gunshot.
A gunshot is a gunshot. It's not like it's like countryside where like your house is a mile away from each other. Like it's like here.
Yeah.
I mean, not where the houses
No, it's
are
not where we
connected.
are. No, it was like suburban.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. It was like here in the city where everybody
shit.
shares walls and you can hear what your neighbors are doing.
For some reason, I thought we were in.
No, haven't been there for years. I'm going to have to bleep that out. So police theorized that on the night of September 28th, David's fellow basketball players were so focused on the game that David was able to slip out, go home unnoticed since it was only a 5-minute drive, kill his family, and return to play basketball, and that was what was creating his alibi, thus resulting in all 11 players who were at the church playing basketball at that time They went on the record and stated that they were 100% sure that he was in the church at all times on the basketball court the entire time. So when this case went to court, it was, again, highly publicized. To counter the 11 eyewitnesses playing basketball, it was brought to the jury's attention that David sat out of just one of those basketball games alone. So everybody else was playing. He sat out for an entire basketball game.
Okay, but there's still an entire crowd.
No. No, Boo. This is like just them friends hanging out. Like there was no.
Oh.
It was just guys.
Oh,
just
okay. I'm thinking
dudes
it's
being guys.
Okay.
No, it wasn't like an actual basketball game. It was.
Oh,
Oh
it's
no!
just
Then there would
like-
be so many more witnesses.
I was like, wait, what's
I'm
going
sorry.
on?
Maybe I didn't make that clear. They were just.
Oh, it's okay. It's probably just me.
There was a basketball hoop and 11 guys being dudes.
And then there's like playing.
Well, 12
against
guys.
each
Yeah,
other.
just
Okay.
playing with each other's balls. What are you gonna do?
Love it.
They then showed the 8 small specks of blood on David's shirt. The jury was informed that the stains were caused by high-velocity impact spatter, which was unique and different from other stains, putting that t-shirt and the man who wore it within 4 feet of a gunshot fired on a person. In his defense, David Cam says the blood was from when he reached over in the car to grab his son and attempt to resuscitate him. So the question you're asking is probably why, If David Cam did it, what was his motive? Well, this is when prosecutors brought forth 12 women, all of which came forward stating that they were having an affair with David Cam.
Oh, shit.
To this, David did admit having a few affairs, but not all 12. He said he was shameful. He took full responsibility for that, but claims
This is a man, like he's a man of God.
But he claims it was no reason to kill his family. So the evidence of 5-year-old Jill's molestation was never charged in this case. So after this, he was convicted and thrown in prison for life. But then came appealed, and 2 years later, the Indiana Supreme Court overturns this conviction, noting that the state did not adequately prove his infidelity was a motive for murder. So basically, the state didn't prove that the fact that he had a few affairs, though morally wrong, it wasn't enough evidence that he murdered his family. So the Supreme Court also warns the next trial judge that allowing the molestation accusations of 5-year-old Jill could lead to another reversal. So again, they can't, it's up to the Supreme Court. I didn't go to law school, so I can't fucking say shit. So then there's a new county prosecutor, Keith Henderson. So he refiled the charges against Cam and also announced that his office would launch a, quote, fresh eyes investigation. So we got some new people in the case, which, can be a good or a bad thing. So the public now wondered, how thorough was the murder investigation in just 3 days? Well, motherfuckers, there was one piece of the puzzle missing that was never brought to the attention of the jury.
Isn't there always one piece of the puzzle missing?
On September 28th, 2000, the night of the murders, a sweatshirt was found next to Kim's body. Investigators found DNA on it, but it did not match David Cam, nor any previous convicted person in their database. However, a name on the collar of the sweatshirt was written in black Sharpie and said, Backbone. But the sweatshirt wasn't the only piece of evidence that was not brought to the first trial. There was a handprint left on Kim's black Ford Bronco that night. The handprint did not belong to anyone in the Cam family. It belonged to a man named Charles Bonet, an ex-convict with a history of violence and a nickname, Backbone. In 2004, Charles Bonet was interviewed by investigators. His exact words were, quote, "I never ever encountered Mr. David Cam," end quote. So you can see in this case, I had never heard of it before.
Me neither.
And it was pretty big. It was on like 48 hours and I think possibly 2020. Who knows? Maybe Dateline. I don't know.
Dateline's my favorite.
Def not Disney Channel. But
Nope, not there.
this man, this Charles Bonet, the essence of his being is so suave. It's so
He's like charming.
average Joe. Now the year is 2005. 5 years later, a half a decade after the murders. Is that a half a decade? Is a decade 10 years?
Yes.
Perfect. So 48 hours followed this investigation and had the chance to sit down with the prosecutor from the first trial. I didn't name drop him in the first trial. I don't know why I didn't do it. I have the notes though. This is the prosecutor who Keith Henderson replaced in the second trial. So the first guy, his name is Stan Faith, state prosecutor. He was questioned about the sweatshirt and why it was never brought to the jury as evidence in the initial trial. Stan claimed that he knew about the sweatshirt with the mystery DNA. He asked the police to, quote, check that out, end quote.
Check that out. Like, what?
Right.
Can you take this seriously or not?
When the police came back, they said they checked it out, and DNA was found, but did not match anything on file. Stan never questioned it nor followed up. However, the DNA was in the database all along because when tested again, the DNA matched Charles Bonnet.
Look at that.
But why would he be in the police database? Thank you for asking, Sarah. I'm so glad you asked. Well, Charles Bonnet, a.k.a. Backbone, was an 11-time convicted felon with a history of attacking and terrorizing women starting in 1989. He had been released from prison just months before the murders after serving 11 years in prison for holding 3 Indiana University students hostage at gunpoint in their apartment. But Backbone wasn't his only nickname, baby. Oh no, he had another name. Charles Bonnet was also known to the police as the Shoe Bandit, a man who would steal the shoes of his female victims and fully admitted to having a foot fetish. This brings us to another piece of the puzzle that was in the garage that night that was never brought to court.
Look at that.
Back at the original crime scene in 2000, Kim's lifeless body was found barefoot, but her shoes were oddly placed neatly on top of the SUV. When detectives asked him to explain about his handprint on the SUV and his knowledge of the strange placement of the shoes, Bonnet backtracked. An investigator stated, "Your best case scenario is to be a witness." That was a quote. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. And that's a very sketchy line. We'll come back to it. With this information soon to be publicized, Charles Bonnet, a.k.a. Backbone, a.k.a. the Shoe Bandit, contradicted his original statement from 2004, and he said he did in fact know David Cam. He actually provided the gun that David used to murder his wife and kids.
Oh my God.
State prosecutor Keith Henderson had all charges against David Cam dropped in 2005. His cell door was opened. He was escorted out. His handcuffs were unlocked. And David Cam, bitch, he was a free man.
Okay, but after all that trauma?
Oh, baby. There's no time for celebration because 60 minutes after he was freed, David Cam was arrested again with 3 counts of murder.
Yo.
State prosecutor Henderson only freed him because in order to move on with the case, he had to drop all previous charges.
I'm going to throw up.
In 2006, David Cam and Charles Backbone Shoe Bandit Bonnet went to trial simultaneously but on separate sides of the state. So they were going in different courthouses.
But David Cam didn't do anything. It's literally all the Shoe Bandit.
David Cam persistently stated that he never met Bonnet, but Charles Bonnet had a different story.
Of course he did.
In a written statement, Bonnet stated he met David a couple months prior to the murders at a basketball game and ran into him again at a convenience store. Bonnet said Cam asked him to buy a gun, and once the deal was done, David asked for another gun. The two arranged to meet the night of September 28th, 2000 at David Cam's home. Bonnet says that he gave David Cam the gun wrapped in his sweatshirt, the sweatshirt that was found at the crime scene. So in an interview with 48 Hours, Charles Bonnet said, "I lied about not knowing David Cam in the very beginning. I lied about not being at the crime scene. I gave Pinocchio a run for the Oscar." And he was so suave about all of this. He was calm. He was collected. He doesn't seem human. He seems too human.
A sociopath.
So in court, Bonnet stated he was there when Kim pulled her black Bronco SUV into the garage. He said David then followed her. From outside, Bonnet heard David shouting at her, and shortly after, he heard 3 gunshots. Then Bonnet says David came after him. He walked out of the garage over to Bonnet, pointed the gun in his face, pulled the trigger, but the gun misfired. And this is where the story, if it wasn't already, gets a little weird. Bonnet says that after the gun misfired, he ran towards David, chasing him back into the garage. To that, Bonnet says, "Why run after him? There are no bullets left in the weapon." So contrary to what another person would do in the situation, which would be run away, not knowing if there were no more bullets or if it just misfired, this part of his story explained partially why Bonnet would, like any of his DNA would be found in the garage, because he entered the garage. Now he's putting himself at the scene of the crime, admitting he was there, he didn't do it.
Wait.
He's trying to explain why his DNA is in the garage. This is Bonnet's story.
Oh, okay.
So Bonnet is saying that David Cam killed his family. Okay. He watched. David tried to kill Bonnet, but when the gun misfired, Bonnet ran to him, entered the garage. Now for the first time, he's in the scene of the crime.
Okay.
So for like anytime he's going to be questioned during the trial, when they're just
It'll
like,
be
why
like,
is your
why is-
DNA here? Why is your
it'll be
hair here?
like-
Why is your sweatshirt here? Fucking blah, 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 blah. So at the same time, on the other side of the state of Indiana, state prosecutor Keith Henderson argued the man's motive wasn't his infidelity, but his molestation. So this is where this comes up. Henderson said that Jill told Kim she was being molested by her father, and Kim threatened to leave.
Oh, no.
That's the story that they're spinning now. The jury finds David guilty, and he is sentenced to life in prison without parole. So then, again, hopping back on over to Charles Bonnet, he was convicted and sentenced to 225 years in prison for the murders. For the record here, David Cam has undergone 2 trials with 2 convictions. So David's lawyer filed an appeal against the Indiana Supreme Court. In 2009, justices overturned his second conviction. The jury was unfairly influenced without any evidence, with the unproven theory that David abused his daughter. Justices stated, quote, "Missing from this record is any competent evidence of the premise that the defendant molested the child," end quote. And just to backtrack, I don't know if it was clear to everybody, but the reason he was thrown into jail he was sentenced to life was not because he molested his daughter. I don't know if you were piecing that together, because I know this is all over the place, but that was his motive, was that, he molested his daughter. Daughter told the mom was pissed, said, "I'm going to leave," because that's how that works. And then he killed him. And the jury bought it, sent him to life in prison. I know it's a lot. There's like 6 trials that are going on here.
Bonet
okay.
say that David molested his daughter, and
No, he didn't bring any of that up.
Okay.
This was the state prosecutor.
Said that David
Yes, this is
molested-
Henderson.
Okay.
David Cam waited 3 more years in a jail cell for his 3rd trial. He
gonna
received a 3rd lawyer. After looking further into the evidence, investigators found Bonnet's DNA on all 3 victims, on Jill's shirt, Bradley's shirt, Kim's underwear, and under Kim's fingernails. This evidence proves that at some point Kim fought with Bonnet while still alive. This evidence should have been brought to court 13 years prior to when they had the first hearing, if investigators would have done their job and looked a little bit harder at the evidence.
I'm saying.
And so the 3rd trial begins. August 2013. 2013.
What?
Yes.
That was like not that long ago.
At the Boone County Courthouse. Hey, baby, how you doing? Boone County. So David Cam got his 3rd lawyer, and there was a 3rd state prosecutor named Todd Mayer. Now, every time there's been a different state prosecutor. The first one clearly didn't do such a hot job. The second one was kind of being led blindly, and he didn't really follow the entire case as it was happening. So
literally, that's why everything got fucked up.
in accordance with the first 2 appeals, the judge prohibited any testimony about David Cam's 12 affairs or the child molestation allegations. The judge also would not allow the defense to mention Bonnet's foot fetish either. Just going to put that out there. So on the day Charles Bonnet testified, officers escorted the man into the courtroom, his hands and ankles shackled against his DOC jumpsuit. Then David Cam entered the room. The 2 men locked eyes and didn't blink. When the judge asked Bonnet to point out David Cam in the room, he stared right at him and stated, quote, "Mr. Cam is sitting right there, in the suit, blue tie, looking very dapper," end quote. In this case, prosecutors focused on Jill's 8 specks of blood on David's t-shirt. They stated that the only way the blood could have ended up on his t-shirt is if he pulled the trigger himself. Bonnet testified that he handed David the gun that night in 2000. Kim pulled up in the family garage, and that's when, this is his story still. Then David followed her into the garage. They were arguing. Then he heard pop, a little boy yelling, "Daddy," followed by another pop and a 3rd pop. Bonnet said David emerged from the garage, turned the point on him, tried to shoot, but it didn't work. He ran towards the house. You already know. But then Bonnet says he tripped over Kim's shoes. And then he says he placed them on top of the truck so the same wouldn't happen to anybody else.
Why is he so smart?
What? What do you mean? He's smart? What the fuck? So the police find the fucking shoes on top of the SUV. Okay, and he's saying there's a dead woman on the floor. There's 2 dead children in the SUV. He's running. He doesn't trip on the body. He just trips on her shoes, takes them off of her fucking feet and puts them on top of the car just, so nobody else would have the inconvenience of tripping on them. Are you fucking kidding me? Backbone? Oh, Jesus. Okay.
I thought the shoes thing was okay.
What? That he put the shoes on top of it?
You see, this is why I'm not good at... I would be like, okay, yeah.
Oh! You'd be like, you know what? That man's nice. That was considerate. Sir? Go ahead. Come on. Those look uncomfortable. That jumpsuit orange is not your color, honey. Let's get him out of there.
Step down.
Let's go. Let's buy him things. Let's take him shopping for shoes. Man loves shoes. So, Bonet said he did not touch anyone, and then he fled the scene. In his defense regarding the DNA found on Jill's shirt, Brad's shirt, Kim's underwear, and under Kim's fingernails, Bonet claims that he shook hands with David while handing over the gun wrapped in his sweatshirt, and that is how his DNA was spread. His DNA was on David and spread to everybody. So, the defense brought in crime scene reconstructionist Eugene Licio, who made a 3D digital replica of the crime scene in the SUV. So basically, we're focusing on the SUV here. He says the way the bodies were laid out and the angle the kids were in the car, the body of the actual SUV would have blocked any of Jill's blood from hitting David's shirt where it was found. He concluded that the blood on David's shirt came from transfer, and they were actually not the same blood spatter pattern. Blood splatter pattern. Yes. He said that when they brought it to the first court, remember they said that the only way this pattern happens is if somebody was in close range and shot somebody. That's the way that this blood happens. Now this dude who is like a professional comes in and he's like, nah, that's not, this is transfer blood. This is not splatter from, a gunshot. So the defense further argued that the basketball players corroborating the man's alibi never wavered. And according to his lawyer, David's arrest was the result of a botched investigation, and Stan Faith, the dude from the first state prosecutor, he had tunnel vision with intent to convict David and totally ignored evidence. Prosecutor Todd Mayer called David Cam a murderer. This is at the third. Called David Cam a murderer and showed jurors photos of Kim, Brad, and Jill, stating, quote, "You have to wonder where they would be today." Defense attorney Stacey Ulana reminded the jury of the 18 cuts and bruises that had been found on Kim's body. Where the fuck was any of this information?
The first time.
Where's a knife?
Second time.
Where's a knife? If there's... Hello? Is this on? Justice, are you there? Sorry, you can't come to the phone right now. The defense attorney, Stacey, says, quote, "She fought long and she fought hard. She fought for her children. Charles Bonet can take away David's family. The state of Indiana can take away his freedom, but they can't take away the truth and knowledge. David did everything in his power that night to save his family," end quote. After 8 weeks of this third hearing, the jury deliberated for 10 hours. They found David Cam not guilty. So David sobbed. He stood up, sat down, praised God, thanked the jury, and left the courtroom a free man.
After all that, though...
Still believing David was the killer, Kim's parents, Frank and Janice Wren, sat frozen in their seats. Frank did not move for 20 minutes. They both had endured years of torment, attending every single minute of every single court case for 13 years. But fuck, man, that's their daughter. That's their daughter and their grandkids. That's true,
but we know who did it. The shoe-loving bandit.
After the fact, a jury member who asked to remain anonymous was interviewed. She said in this interview that her and other jury members were put off by many witness accounts. A witness who was a state police crime investigator who was friends with David stated that on September 28th, 2000, he said, quote, "This looked like a David Cam crime scene," end quote, before he even entered the garage. He was looking for evidence to support the conclusion he had already come to. So David's lawyers also stated that all state investigators ignored the evidence that showed David Cam's innocence. And in the state of Indiana, the jury has the chance to actually ask witnesses a question. So the same anonymous juror asked Charles Bonet, "What did David Cam wear the night of the murder?" Charles Bonet replied with long pants and that t-shirt. But the answer was wrong. David was wearing basketball shorts. This case affected the entire community, obviously, but it wasn't just emotionally. This cost for David's 3 trials came to $4.5 million of taxpayers' money.
For him to be innocent. Like,
at council meetings, officials discussed layoffs as possible solution for their budget crisis, which obviously got the townspeople a little fucking pissed. For years, the community had publicly expressed their frustration with David Cam's trials. Why should a convicted killer get another chance? One editorial online rallied against defense lawyers for damaging the county with the costs of the repeals. A commenter responded the day of Thanksgiving, quote, "I hope Cam dies while choking on his turkey tomorrow, murderer." This is how life was for this man who did not kill his family. Much like the rest of the town, still, Kim's parents, Frank and Janice, still believed David was the one who murdered their daughter and 2 grandchildren. They visited their plot in the cemetery where Kim, Jill, and Brad shared a gravestone. Originally, David had his name carved into the stone and planned to be buried with his family once he died, but Frank and Janice had replaced the stone. The new gravestone only had the 3 names of the victims with no room for David. David has taken a job as a caseworker for the nonprofit Investigating Innocence. He studies the wrongful convictions of people across the country and says those who have never dealt with the criminal justice system can't truly understand it. Keep that in mind because, from us watching cases happen, but at the end of the day, getting to sleep in our own bed, not having to deal with any of that stuff, not, having your family murdered,
murdered and basically in front of your face, and then
having your reputation
and then literally getting
torn.
Ripped from your family. Like, you can't even,
all of it. And
them.
Everybody thinks you're a murderer, but all you're trying to do is be a normal person who was in an unfortunate fucking situation where your family got murdered by somebody else, but the town hates you when they should be consoling you. All right, here comes another quote. Ready? When you interject people into those positions, they have agenda. They have political ambitions. They are motivated by money, fame, arrogance, ego. That is when things begin to fail because of a specific person's own agenda versus them doing the job they're supposed to do, especially at the trial court level. Well, the trial court level in southern Indiana, end quote. That was David Cam regarding, people who were handling the case. Like in his trial, David Cam believes it's ultimately up to the judge to ensure fairness in the courtroom and see that justice is served, right? That's why we started courts. That's why it was all started, so justice could be served, so we could bring forth the truth, keep your egos at bay. David says, another quote, "But when you have a judge that basically is an extension of the prosecutor, then innocent people are going to go to prison. It happens all the time. We see it all the time." A year after he was freed, David Cam sued the police and some state experts seeking $30 million in damages for alleged unlawful investigation, arrest, and imprisonment. This man was in jail for 13 years for a crime he didn't commit.
How much money did he get?
In January of 2018, just last month, actually a couple weeks ago, a full 18 years after the murders, the judge denied his request. Judge Walton Pratt granted the motions of police prosecutors and forensic examiners for summary judgment and dismissed the case with prejudice. Judge Pratt ruled that authorities properly relied on blood spatter found on David Cam's clothing to find probable cause to charge him. So they said they weren't in the wrong.
No, there's not. No.
They relied on the blood spatter found on David Cam's clothing to find probable cause to charge him, and that they had not committed misconduct in carrying out their investigations, even though they ignored the DNA of a 5th fucking person in the garage. So let me take a step back here. Okay, so in this story, much like others we do, Kim, Brad, and Jill have been reduced to DNA and blood patterns. So I think it's important, to remember that these are real people, a woman and 2 kids, ages 7 and 5, who never got a chance at life. The Wrens, her parents, remember Brad as a little boy who liked to dress up as his favorite Disney characters. He could recite the names of every book of the Bible from Genesis to Revelations. As we record this podcast in 2018, he would be 25 now. Jill was a tomboy with a full head of shiny blonde hair. She would be 23 and probably an athlete. Both would have already graduated college. Her parents say that Kim would probably be a top executive by now. She liked to listen more than she talked. Her father says she solved her own problems, and she had an unforgettable laugh. So that is the David Cam case.
I don't even know what to say.
Okay, so I have a couple more thoughts in conclusion to this. I know it was lengthy, and I know there was 700 fucking things happening at the same time. These are thoughts that I just jotted down as I was researching. I wanted to bring them up in conversation. So here we go. So Kim, Jill, and Brad were shot execution style with just one bullet. So being a previous officer, David Cam would have known how to do this. These were notes I was taking before I knew anything. However, it would be easy for a large, scary man of Charles Bonnet's build to hold a gun, have full control of helpless women and 2 children. Just a thought. Keep in mind, he went to jail for doing the same thing to 3 grown women at a university.
I'm saying.
But he didn't pull the trigger. So, separate thought. Police say, when they had their questioning with David, police said that there were signs of a cleanup. They say there were traces of bleach. However, what was that? However, to my knowledge, I did some deep research, bitch. I typed a 13-page essay here. The bleach and the alleged evidence of a cleanup were never brought up in court. I could be wrong, but I did some deep fucking research.
I doubt that you're wrong because it seems like they left out a lot.
But, they could have potentially been lying about it, which is kind of what the conclusion I'm coming to.
Yeah, they all wanted David to be guilty.
Oftentimes, investigators and police are bluffing and they're trying to scare the person into confessing, which brings me to my overall largest question. Maybe you were wondering this. Maybe you, the listener, you there with the ugly friends, maybe you were wondering this. Was there beef between David Cam and the police he used to work with?
Because they were like, he's guilty.
Yeah, keep in mind the police and a lot of the investigators doing this shit were, and they were his friends, and he had recently resigned.
Right.
But maybe he had some secrets since nobody really knew about the 12 women. So here's just a thought. So maybe an officer found out that David Cam was having an affair with his wife, that officer's wife, maybe, causing him to leave. Maybe that came around the station, and that's the reason why he resigned. Just a thought. Maybe that officer, or the help of a few others, reached out to Bonnet, a person who had recently got out of jail. They knew what he was capable of. They knew the dude, and they hired him as a hitman to get back at David by killing his entire family. They could have told Bonnet that they were police officers, and they could withhold information from the jury that would put Bonnet in the picture at all, which is totally plausible considering the fact that Bonnet was not even a suspect until years after their first trial when David Cam already was in prison. So when the 12 women were all brought to testify that they were all sleeping with David while he was married and, had kids, maybe, the wife of a fellow officer was withheld. She wasn't brought into the situation, but that whole situation was brought in to make him look bad, just kind of really airing out his laundry, taking everything from him because maybe that officer had everything taken from him. So think about it. The prosecutor from the first trial, Stan Faith, knew there was a sweatshirt with a name written on it, pointing directly to the person that they should fucking investigate. He knew that there was mystery DNA in the garage. He knew there was a handprint on the SUV. He knew about the DNA on Jill, the DNA on Brad, the DNA on Kim's underwear, under her fucking fingernails. That kind of DNA is put under your fucking fingernails when you're in a physical fight. That is shit that they found out before the bodies were buried, before the funeral, because the bodies were never exhumed. So this was information that was known before the bodies were even put into the ground.
Yep. So that should have been
days after he was
first trial.
Bruh. But this information was never given to the jury until the third fucking trial, 13 years after the first conviction of David Cam. Then in the third trial, prosecutor Todd Mayer called David Cam a murderer and showed the jurors photos of Kim. I'm sorry, I'm getting heated, but also I'm not fucking sorry. He showed Kim and the kids, and he pulled the fucking sympathy card. He stated, "You have to wonder where they would be today."
Okay.
He's fucking grasping at straws. He's trying to pull people's heartstrings.
Reaching, sir. You are reaching.
I'm sorry.
That man was reaching.
He was fucking grasping for straws at that point, and now it's not about justice being served. It's about a prosecutor wanting to put an end to this trial, having a whole town happy with him, being celebrated for putting away a man who has been put on trial for 13 years and getting paid to do it. Do you think Todd Mayer really gives a fuck about Kim, Brad, or Jill, where they would be today if they were alive? I'll save you the time. No, he wouldn't.
No.
It was a weak fight against an innocent man who lost his wife, his kids. He spent years behind bars with fellow inmates thinking that he molested his daughter. Also, gonna rewind back to that, sweetie. Hit that be kind rewind, babe. They never found David Cam's DNA anywhere on Jill's body or in her.
Right.
So the whole molestation case, the whole
was
second
dropped.
Well, the fact should have been dropped, but it wasn't. It was brought to court.
And like,
and they pulled the fucking heartstrings because it was a child, and it framed him perfectly. So at that point, it's all null and void. Good day, sir. My final thought was, I don't want to go here. But my final thought was, who was shot first? Because it was either the kids watched their mother be murdered, or the mother watched their kids die, and that's how they spent their last moments on Earth.
I think. I don't know.
There's no evidence against that.
Right.
There's no way we can tell. So David Cam was found to be innocent. He's now a free man, but nobody won here. The family was torn apart. David's nieces had a childhood in a whole town that hated them, that probably fucked them up for life. Kim's parents still think David did it. They lost together. They lost Kim. They lost the kids.
Okay, David lost his whole family, and everyone, he didn't get to mourn them because everyone thought he killed them. That's the worst.
Yeah, he spent 13 years of his life an innocent man until he was acquitted. 13 years of his life are gone. His whole life is torn. I mean, now in interviews with him, he's smiling and he's happy, and he says he can't do anything but be happy because I think us looking at this case, we can think that that's weird that he had all this shit happen to him, but
and he's still happy.
It's over. What else does he have?
What's the point?
If he's going to be, he chose to take a high road and, make his...
I think that's the hardest thing to do, though.
Yeah, I would agree. But fuck, once you've been through it for 13 years...
It's what else? What else you got, life?
Seriously. 3 innocent people are dead. So think about how many stories are out there of innocent people who were never acquitted. Yeah, hi. You have your hand up? Yeah, I heard.
Yeah, so...
Think about how many people are sitting in prison being charged for a murder they didn't commit.
I have another one.
Oh, shit.
So the story was in 2016. A Tennessee man who served 31 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. He petitioned to the state to compensate him $1 million for the years of his life that were taken away, and all he got was $75.
75? Wait, hold on.
$75.
He didn't... Oh, my God, I'm sweating.
He spent 31 years in jail.
Mm.
If you guys want to see this article, it's on CNN. It's called...
I'll link it all.
Tennessee man inmate wrongly imprisoned, and Jonathan will link it. But yeah, this was people started making memes about this, and not that it's funny, but
yeah,
it's just there literally is so many people that are innocent and they get thrown in jail.
Yeah, but the system's fucked. We have a system. It has flaws that lead.
I think it's the people. The people are just corrupt in there, and they want to.
That's the
system. They want to be the hero.
That's the system, dude.
Or they want to get paid,
right.
or etc.
Of course, it's their job. At the end of the day, you got to put food on the table for your family. Why not drive a Ferrari? Did you see Making a Murderer?
I watched one episode, but for some reason I just couldn't get into it.
Oh my God, I was so into it. I used to run on the treadmill and watch it. That would be how I would be on the treadmill for an hour.
I love that.
Would be I would watch it.
I'm gonna take that.
Okay, so let's lighten up the mood for a hot second. I have a fun fact. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
During his or her lifetime, the average human will grow 590 miles of hair. Well, I got news for you, baby. I'm not your average girl. You got a fun fact?
Facebook addiction disorder is a mental disorder identified by psychologists.
Yikes. I feel like we could talk about that shit.
I was going to say, I saw this and I felt like it was a fun fact because regardless of what we talked about before, there are people who are so involved in social media and the facade and making themselves look great, and I really think it's a disease.
It's like changing our brain.
Yeah.
Because we've never really dealt with this shit before.
Right, and it's nothing is...
as it seems.
That, and it's who really is this person?
Yeah, you never know. So speaking of social media, y'all can follow us on all of that shit. Instagram at Esoteric Oddities, Twitter, Esoteric Oddity, ODDITIE. Shoot us an email at odditiespodcast@gmail.com. We have gotten a couple and we will get to them, babes. Hang in there. And if you guys are listening to us anywhere you can rate us, we would appreciate a rating. Some feedback is great. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate your support and all of our Patreon supporters, thank you guys again.
Thank
That is
you.
patreon.com/esoteric oddities. You can, any amount helps us out a lot, and we appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for listening.
Thank
Share this with your friends.
so much. Yes, tell them about it. If you
Your
like
ugly
it.
your ugly friends might be into like weird shit and murder. Be fucking nice to each other and
Stay spooky.
stay spooky. Hey, smell a flower today. Unless you're allergic, then don't fucking do that. Love you.
Bye.